We begin tonight with Matt Lauer. Hunter Valley Station is 6,500 hectares on the banks of Lake Hawea with Lake Wanaka on its western side. When they were selling the lease, Sotheby's described it as the pure essence of the Southern Alps. The lease was bought by Matt Lauer for $13 million. Approval was granted by the Overseas Investment Office subject to some conditions, including access. Open use of the unsealed road that runs through the property was not one of the conditions. Mark Mitchell, the Land Information Minister in the National-led government at the time, today told Stuff he totally stood by the OIO decision. When Matt Lauer was fired by NBC following sexual misconduct allegations, the OIO reassessed him under their good character test and determined there was insufficient evidence to take proceedings against him. So here he is with OIO consent and with the consent of the previous government. But he has found himself at the centre of an increasingly high-volume debate about access to this special place and the larger issues around foreign ownership of land like this, even as leaseholders. Acting Prime Minister Winston Peters has attacked the OIO's approval. New Land Information Minister Eugenie Sage says it's the previous government's fault. At the heart of this is access to that road because the treasured public land people most want access to is at the far end of the station. So what next? And if we're going to sell land like this to foreign buyers or indeed any buyers, how is a balancing act achieved between private property and public access? Our producer Bridget Burke has been asking Matt Lauer to speak to us, and this afternoon he did.
Everybody's talking about Hunter Valley Station, so I'm happy to talk about it with you.
What do you want to say first up? What do you want to say to the people of New Zealand first up?
Well, I first of all, I think there's an enormous amount of misinformation out there, John, and I would love to think it's just, coincidental and it's just a mistake. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the information is being put out there to stir up public concern or public outrage. The fact of the matter is we went through an OIO process when we set out to gain the pastoral lease for Hunter Valley Station. We went through that process. It was, I believe, more than a year long. We did everything that was asked of us. We met with local access groups up at the farm. I wasn't there, but my representatives were. We met at the farm. We talked about concerns. They got to voice their opinions about access. We gave access to a part of the station that had not been formally granted before. And then we met every single requirement placed on us by the OIO. And then a year later, we find out that an easement, certain people are trying to put an easement on us. And the thing that's the most frustrating about it is I don't know what problem we're trying to solve, because we have never denied people access who have gone through the correct procedure and called the station and said they were prepared to be on that road and properly equipped. We kept a log of all the people who called, and I think out of more than 100 people who requested access, only 3 or maybe 4 were denied, and that was because of farming operations. So I'm not sure what the problem is that these people are trying to solve. We have not denied access to anyone if not for something other than farming operations. And that's only been 3 or 4 times.
The Walking Access Commission wants to negotiate use of this
Right.
unsealed road, right? So this is roughly 40k of unsealed road that goes along the side of the lake and takes people into an
Right.
area that is truly magnificent, which is the Hunter Valley.
Right.
And you are saying that so far 100 people have applied for access to the Hunter Valley along this road?
We have logs, John. We keep a log of every call. The procedure is you call the station. You say, I'd like to come back there. I'd like to go hiking up that road or whatever. And we say, are you properly equipped? Do you know the conditions of the road? In the winter, that road is a very difficult road. It frosts over. It's very steep on one side down to the lake or the river, depending on where you are. It's very steep on the other side because it goes up into the mountains. And we ask them if they're prepared. If they're adequately prepared and we know who's going back there so that we can keep track of them, And we don't get a situation where 2 days later someone's calling looking for their loved one and we have to go back there and look. But as long as they tell us where they're going to be, how long they intend to be back there, and that they're properly equipped, we have let everyone go back there.
And yet
Everyone.
there is a sense from the Federated Mountain Clubs, from the Walking Access Commission, that in fact there is no easement, there is no access.
Okay, can I ask you then, ask them to give you the names of the people who've been refused access. We've asked them that. We said, tell us the people who've complained, because we've got our logs, and we'll have a log of when they called, and the log will show that they were granted access. The only time, as I said, I believe out of more than 100 requests, only 3 or 4 people were denied, and that's because there were farming operations at the time that didn't make it feasible. But they keep saying, I heard a gentleman interviewed the other day on a radio show who said, he was one of the access advocates, and he said, well, we're hearing people are being denied access. Give me a name. Tell me the people who are complaining. And maybe a good idea, John, is to call the people who've called up and been granted access and let them tell you how easy it was. So this easement that's being proposed is being proposed to solve a problem that does not exist. And that's the misinformation that's out there.
Right.
And it's out there on purpose.
Okay, but if the easement is being proposed to solve a problem that does not exist, why can't the easement simply be granted? Why can't the easement exist?
Because the easement itself would create a problem. All of a sudden, we would have no way of knowing who's back there. One of the directors of one of the groups said it would be carefully managed. Well, by who? Is there going to be someone from Walking Access Commission sitting on the side of the road, or are the people who farm that property going to have to sit there and count every person that goes back there? And what's going to happen when they get back there and they don't come back out? Are we supposed to stop farming that land and go look for them? There's no cell phone coverage on that road. So what the easement of allowing people to go without going through the process that we have established. And by the way, I didn't establish that process. That was established long before I took the pastoral lease. People have been gaining access to this property for years. Now, I know there have been some controversies in the past. I was not a part of those. I came along, 14, 15 months ago, John. But if we have a way to control access so that we know who's back there, how many people are back there, where they intended to go, then we can keep it safe for everyone. If you just grant an easement and people are going back there, we either have to sit by the side of the road and count people, or we're going to have a problem back there.
Did you or anyone representing you ask for financial compensation in return for an easement if an easement is indeed imposed?
Okay, that's a very important point, John. We, by statute, the groups seeking this and the organizations seeking this are supposed to involve us as the holders of the pastoral lease. We have not been involved. No one has come as part of this process. We're hearing about this, that it's going on behind the scenes and behind our backs. And we hear about it, but by statute, they're supposed to come to us and make us part of the process. So no, we haven't demanded any money because we're not a part of the process. But by the way, it's important to know that it's not a case of saying he would want compensation. Your statute says that. Your statute says if an easement is placed on a property, the pastoral lease owner or the property owner is entitled to compensation. I have not asked for a cent.
Would you want it? If you are entitled to it, would you want it?
Let me ask you this. Do you think that would, if an easement were granted on that stretch of road that cuts directly through the heart of the farming operation and within about 30 meters of the homestead, do you think that would have an impact of the value of that property, of my investment?
So that's a yes to my question, isn't it? If there
No,
is...
but let me ask. But I'm asking you to answer.
No, Matt. Hold on. Look, I'm interviewing you. I'm asking you the question, and the question is:
but
if
I'm
there is an
entitlement
to compensation, if the easement is granted, would you want that compensation? Yeah, the answer is clearly yes, isn't it?
I would certainly explore that option.
You would.
I would explore that option, as I think anybody would. Let me make something clear. I think, John, it's important. In my opinion, and I don't think I'm being a conspiracy theorist here or paranoid. I believe the groups that are behind this are in some ways, unfortunately, taking advantage of some difficult times I've been through over the past 6 months, and I think they see me as an easy mark. And what they're going to try to do is put this through, which would set a precedent, because this has not been done ever before with a pastoral leaseholder or a property owner without that person's consent. And I think they're trying to set a precedent. And I want to just tell people that this is not just about me, that precedent will then be used for other property owners. This is not a one-off.
It could also be possible that this has nothing whatsoever to do with the circumstances of your dismissal from NBC, and it could have everything to do.
Well, you know what, though? I think that most of the articles I've read, John, and the comments I've heard on radio programs, they make very frequent reference to that because they think, I believe, they think that New Zealanders are going to find some outrage there. And I will tell people they don't know the circumstances of that situation. I promise you, people don't know, and I'm not at liberty to talk, nor would I want to talk about that. But
let's talk about the land.
Fight for a reason.
Let's talk about the land.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about.
Okay. Well, you raised the circumstances of your departure from NBC. Let's talk about.
I'm just saying, but I think this is why this fight has been chosen now.
Isn't it possible that it was chosen? Isn't it possible? Isn't it possible that it was chosen because people love this land? And in New Zealand, there is a very strong sense that
no one's been denied access to the land.
And over what period? So you've had 100 people over what period?
I think we've even had more than 100 people. I have logs, John. We have the people farming the property have kept logs. They answer the phone. They take names and numbers down. We have logs. Show me the logs of the people of Walking Access and other people, of all the people who they say have been denied. They don't exist.
Isn't it possible that you actually find yourself at the centre of an argument over foreign ownership of New Zealand land, over public access to New Zealand land? Right.
Absolutely.
And so how do we get the balancing act right?
Has a large part to do with this.
You satisfied the requirements of the Overseas Investment Office. You went through the process.
I went through a year
absolutely.
plus
And
process.
that's not in dispute. And in fact, the OIO have reviewed their own decision and they uphold it. So that's not in dispute.
Right.
But how do we get this right, Matt?
Let me just interrupt and say one thing. Since part of the OIO requirement, after I went through the year process, one of my requirements was that I invest a substantial amount of money to increase stock numbers on the property and bring new land into production. I've done that. I was supposed to do it over a 5-year period. I believe I've done it almost in its entirety in a year and a half. So not only did I make the initial investment in this property, but in the year and a half or year plus that I've owned it, I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve the property. And now a year later, they come and say, oh, but wait a minute. We granted you this lease under this set of rules. We'd like to change the rules. I don't think that's fair.
Do you love this place?
I adore this place.
When were you last here?
You know what?
When did you last visit it?
I was there about 9 months ago, and I'm coming in about a month to do some skiing. I said to a friend of mine the other day, I said, imagine you decide you want to buy the car of your dreams. And you go out shopping, you go to a dealership, and there on the showroom floor is the car of your dreams. and you say, this is it. And you walk up to the salesman, you say, how much is it? He tells you, you say, here's my money. The guy says, wait a minute. You can't buy it yet. The government has to give you permission to buy it, and it's going to take some time. I said, okay, I'll wait. I go through the process. You do everything that's asked of you, and then you come back and you say, now can I buy the car? They say yes. Then you go home, you take that car, you invest a couple of $100,000 in it to make it even better. And a year later, they come to you and they say, oh, we want one of the wheels off that car. We'd like the radio and the air conditioner too. And you say, well, that will dramatically impact the safe operation of the vehicle, my enjoyment of the vehicle, and my comfort in the vehicle.
Matt,
why didn't you tell me this a year ago when I paid all the money?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter. We want it now.
Let's talk about the easement, and let's talk about it in your absence. So you haven't been here for 9 months. You talked before about how invasive it would be for the easement to be granted so people could use that road, which passes very close to the house. But it's not a house you're in.
Well, but it's nowhere. But that's not my main issue. The main issue is the farming operation. That road dissects the farm. It comes within 30 meters of the main stockyard. 30 meters.
Yeah, this
it
is
goes right down the heart of the farm.
And look, I'm not being glib about this. And you are right. You satisfied all the OIO requirements. But this is New Zealand. We drive past stockyards all the time. You know, we drive through stock.
No,
I was recently driving, and there was just hundreds of sheep on the road, and you just slow down, and they go around you.
That's not what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about people running over my sheep.
Okay, I just wonder. Isn't it that actually you want to control this beautiful piece of land, which you correctly say you obtained all the consents for, you went through the process with the OIO and satisfied all their requirements? Isn't it that you want to have it as much to yourself as you possibly can? And that's the issue for New Zealand, isn't it? Why the hell should Matt Lauer have access to this land when we have to jump through hoops to get even on.
So wait a second, John. Is making a phone call jumping through hoops? Is that what you consider jumping through hoops? Picking up the phone and saying, "I'd like to come down that road. I'm properly equipped for a day's hike." That's jumping through hoops.
Can we talk about had the easement?
Let's say it's 100. Let's say it's 100 people that we have in our logs. If 3 people of 100 have been turned down, is 3% unreasonable? You know, the OIO required me to provide reasonable access to that property. Is denying 3% during critical times of farming operations unreasonable?
Is 100 people reasonable?
Let's say it was a person who called with wanting to go back there with 5 people. I mean, I'm not telling people don't call. That's the number of people who've called us.
Absolutely. So can we go? Our acting Prime Minister Winston Peters says the OIO didn't do its job properly, and access the easement should have been part of the conditions.
So should people be mad at me for that?
No, I'm not saying. No, I'm not asking anyone to be mad at you. What the question I was leading to there was: would you have taken this lease if that had been a condition? So you wouldn't have taken it.
No, if they said to me, by the way, there's going to be a complete easement down that road, I probably would have thought different about this. But the fact is, I bought this property after going through that process and being told that one set of circumstances existed. And now a year later, they're coming to me saying, let's change the rules of the game. And I think anybody would find that disturbing.
So what happens if the rules change?
Of money.
So Matt, what happens if the rules change? You've told us you would seek, you would, so you would look at compensation.
I'm not a valuer. I think that's what you call it over there. I would call it an appraiser. I don't know what you call it there. I'm not that person. I think the statute calls for a certain type of person to dive into that. It's too early even for me to worry about that.
But you did say before, and I guess that's on the record now, that if you are entitled to compensation, you would explore your options. You would consider compensation.
That's all.
Would you consider?
Well, again, keep in mind, and you say, keep in mind, it's the statute that dictates that. That's not as some headlines. There was a headline in one of your newspapers yesterday. I think it was, I think it's Sunday, and it says something like trouble. You know, Matt Lauer demands millions of dollars to let Kiwis walk across his property. That is completely factually incorrect. It is. I have not demanded a cent. I am going through the process, which, by the way, is supposed to include me, which has not included me. But I'm going through the process one step at a time, the same way I went through the OIO process, one step at a time. I did everything they asked me to do.
How does New Zealand get this right, Matt? As a person who was watching us from afar and has clearly fallen in love with this country or part of it, how do we get it right when we have rules under the overseas enforced under the Overseas Investment Office, which allow people access to this land? They've allowed you access to this land, but then beyond this land, there is some of the most pristine public land in the country, and people want access to this. How do we achieve the balancing act, do you think?
I don't know how you get it right. You know, it's funny, I have some friends over there who are property owners and have been for decades, and they don't know how New Zealand is going to get this right. But I'll tell you the way you don't get it right is by getting someone who loves your country and the people of your country to come in, invest a lot of money, and do everything that's required of him, and then try to pull the rug out from under him. That's not the way to get it right.
Matt Lauer talking to us earlier this afternoon. So much feedback on that coming in already. Do text us what you think, not only of the specific, the particular, but also the universal. How do we get the Balancing Act right? 2101. After 6, the Walking Access Commission are going to join us to respond to some of what Matt Lauer was saying. But